I'm gonna beat the shit out of him next time. You keep talking.
Daniel Cormier, double champ, Olympic wrestler, Hall of Famer. But here's what's wild. Even now, years after hanging up the gloves, fighters still can't stop talking about DC. And some of what they're saying? It's absolutely shocking. Because while some call him one of the greatest to ever do it, others have stepped up to challenge the legend himself. We're talking about world-class killers saying they could beat Daniel Cormier in his own game. We're talking about heated exchanges, viral moments, and straight-up disrespect that'll make your jaw drop. Today, we're diving deep into what happens when fighters get asked about Daniel Cormier. From the praise that'll give you goosebumps to the call-outs that nearly broke the internet. This isn't just another feel-good story about a retired legend. This is about ego, legacy, and fighters who genuinely believe they could have taken down one of the most dominant forces the UFC has ever seen. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll see DC in a completely different light. Let's start with the most insane call-out in recent memory. Khamzat Chimaev versus Daniel Cormier. Now, if you don't know who Khamzat is, where have you been? This guy is an absolute monster, undefeated, ragdolls middleweights like they're children. His grappling? World-class. The guy made Jack Hermanson, a legit UFC contender, look like he'd never wrestled a day in his life. But here's where it gets crazy. Back in late 2021, fresh off demolishing opponents in the UFC, Khamzat went on a social media rampage. He called out Brock Lesnar. He called out Georges St-Pierre. And then, he set his sights on Daniel Cormier. Let's make a wrestling match, brother. What you think? A wrestling match. Against an Olympic wrestler. Against a guy who placed 4th at the Olympics. Against a man who was team captain of the US Olympic squad in 2008. The audacity was off the charts. But Khamzat wasn't joking around. He'd just beaten Jack Hermanson in a grappling match. He was feeling unstoppable. In his mind, he could challenge anyone, and that included one of the greatest wrestlers to ever step into the octagon. DC's response? Pure gold. In a real wrestling match? Are you crazy, Khamzat? Love that you're confident, but, brother, this is 10-0 DC. 10-0. That's what Daniel Cormier was promising. Not a competitive match, not a tough fight, a complete shutout. And here's the thing, DC probably wasn't exaggerating. Because while Khamzat Chimaev is an incredible grappler in MMA, there's a massive difference between MMA wrestling and actual freestyle wrestling at the Olympic level. It's like comparing a street fighter to a world champion boxer. Yeah, the street fighter can throw hands, but in the ring with the rules, it's a different ballgame. But the story doesn't end there. Fast forward to October 2023, UFC 294 in Abu Dhabi. Khamzat and DC run into each other at the Fighter Hotel, and what happens? They start wrestling in the hallway. The footage went viral instantly. You see Khamzat, who was about to fight at middleweight, literally lifting Daniel Cormier off the ground. And keep in mind, DC at this point is walking around at probably 280 pounds. That's not a small man. That's a heavyweight. Khamzat hoists him up like he weighs nothing, and the MMA world lost its mind. People started saying, "See? Khamzat could actually hang with DC." The comments were insane. Khamzat in his prime smashes DC. This is all I needed to see to place my bet. But here's what people forget. This was a playful exchange. This wasn't a real wrestling match with an official, with rounds, with points being scored. This was two friends goofing around in a hallway. The real question is, could Khamzat actually beat Daniel Cormier in a sanctioned wrestling match? The honest answer? Probably not. Because what made Daniel Cormier so special wasn't just his strength. It was his technique. His wrestling IQ was off the charts. He was famous for something called the go-behind. Essentially, he'd stuff your takedown attempt and spin behind you for his own takedown. It sounds simple, but DC was so good at it that he made it to the Olympics largely based on that one skill. He took down Cael Sanderson with it. If you don't know who that is, Cael Sanderson is arguably the greatest college wrestler of all time. He went 159-0 in his college career. Undefeated. And Daniel Cormier took him down using what's essentially the first move you learn in wrestling. That's the level we're talking about. But the fact that Khamzat even had the confidence to call him out? That tells you everything about the mentality of these top-tier fighters. They genuinely believe they can beat anyone. And honestly, that's what makes them great. Now let's talk about what fighters actually respect about Daniel Cormier. Because despite all the call-outs and all the trash talk, there's one thing that's undeniable. Daniel Cormier was a 2-division champion. And not just any 2 divisions. Light heavyweight and heavyweight. We're talking about jumping from 205 pounds to heavyweight, where guys can weigh up to 165. That's a 60-pound difference. But here's what's even more insane. At UFC 226, when DC knocked out Stipe Miocic to win the heavyweight title, he wasn't some young gun on the rise. He was 39 years old. 39. That's ancient in MMA years. Most fighters at that age are thinking about retirement. DC was becoming a 2-division champion, and the way he did it? Absolutely brutal. One right hand and Stipe Miocic, the most dominant heavyweight champion in UFC history at that point, was out cold. After the fight, DC said something that still gives people chills to this day. "I am 39 years old, and I've been second a lot of times. But tonight, I accomplished everything." That hit different. Because DC's career was filled with heartbreak. He lost to Jon Jones twice. The second time by knockout. He never got to compete at the 2008 Olympics because of kidney failure. His father was murdered when he was 7 years old. His infant daughter died in a car crash. His stepfather died of cancer. This man dealt with more pain than most people could handle in 10 lifetimes. And yet, he kept pushing forward, kept grinding, kept believing that eventually good things happen to good people. And at 39 years old in Las Vegas, against one of the best heavyweights ever, he proved it. Fighters respect that. They respect the fact that DC never made excuses. He never blamed injuries or bad luck or anything else. He just showed up, worked his ass off, and became one of only 4 fighters in UFC history to hold 2 belts simultaneously. Think about that, 4 fighters. Out of thousands who've competed in the UFC, Conor McGregor, Daniel Cormier, Henry Cejudo, Amanda Nunes. That's the entire list. And DC is the only one who successfully defended a title while holding both belts. He defended the light heavyweight title 3 times. He defended the heavyweight title once. Nobody else on that list can say that. So when younger fighters talk about DC, even when they're being cocky, there's always an underlying respect, because they know what it took for him to get there. They know the wars he went through. They know the pain he endured. And deep down, they wonder if they could have survived everything he survived and still come out on top. But let's get back to the controversial stuff. Because the wrestling debate with DC goes deep. Remember when we talked about Khamzat? Well, he wasn't the only one making bold claims about wrestling Daniel Cormier. Islam Makhachev, the current lightweight champion and one of the best grapplers in the entire UFC, also got into it with DC. And this one's particularly interesting because Islam and DC actually train at the same gym, American Kickboxing Academy in San Jose, California. These guys see each other all the time. They roll together. They train together. So Islam knew exactly what level DC was at. And yet, Islam still posted footage of himself taking down Daniel Cormier during a training session. The caption? "Finally, everyone will find out the truth whose wrestling is better. I warned you, DC. Make sure watch the video, guys." Now, Islam's not wrong in the footage. He does get the takedown. He does score points. But here's where DC clapped back. First of all, Makhachev has the greatest video editors of all time. Yes, he did get points there. He got 4 points in wrestling because we were wrestling. But Ryan, he didn't put the rest of the match. If you scrolled through the rest of the videos, there was a guy called Romero Cotton. That was the official. He was scoring the points. By the end of the match, I was the guy with my hand raised. DC claims he won the overall match. And you know what? He probably did. Because Islam is a phenomenal grappler for MMA. But DC is a different beast in pure wrestling. Islam's background is in combat sambo. He's incredibly skilled, but he's not an Olympic-level freestyle wrestler. There's a hierarchy in wrestling. High school wrestling, college wrestling, international wrestling, and then Olympic wrestling. Each level is exponentially harder than the last. And Daniel Cormier competed at the highest level. But the fact that this debate even exists shows you how good these modern fighters are. Islam Makhachev is so skilled that people genuinely wonder if he could hang with an Olympic wrestler. That's insane. And it's not just Islam. When Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam got into a heated debate with DC about Dagestan wrestling versus American wrestling, things got spicy. DC sent some of his wrestling students to Dagestan to train. When he came back, he claimed his students smashed the Dagestan wrestlers. Islam and Khabib immediately called BS on that. "You smash?" Islam said, shocked. "Maybe somebody is lying." Khabib said DC's students only scored 1 point. DC said they scored more. Back and forth they went, each side claiming the other was lying. And here's the thing, both sides probably believe they're telling the truth. Because in training, there's no official record, no video ref. It all comes down to memory and perspective. But what we do know is this. The fact that Daniel Cormier's students are even being compared to world-class Dagestani wrestlers tells you everything about DC's coaching ability. He's not just an elite wrestler himself, he's teaching others to be elite too. That's the mark of true greatness. Not just being good yourself, but being able to teach others to be good. Now we need to talk about the elephant in the room, Jon Jones. Because no matter what Daniel Cormier accomplished, no matter how many titles he won, no matter how many legends he beat, there's always Jon Jones. The rivalry between these two is the stuff of legend. It's Ali versus Frazier. It's Magic versus Bird. It's the kind of rivalry that defines careers. And the brutal truth? Jon Jones beat Daniel Cormier twice. The first time was at UFC 182. Decision, dominant. Jon controlled every round. It wasn't even close. The second time was at UFC 214. And this one? This one hurt. Because Jon knocked DC out cold. First time DC had ever been knocked out in his career. Head kick, lights out. It was devastating to watch. DC broke down in the post-fight interview. You could see the pain in his eyes. Not just physical pain from the knockout, but emotional pain from losing to Jones again. But here's the twist. That knockout, it got overturned. Jon Jones tested positive for steroids. The result was changed to a no contest. The belt went back to DC. And this is where the debate gets interesting. Because fighters are split on this. Some say DC is the true light heavyweight champion. He never lost the belt in a fair fight. Every time he lost to Jon Jones, there were asterisks, steroids, eye pokes, controversy. Others say it doesn't matter. Jon Jones beat him twice, and even if he was on steroids, he was still the better fighter. It's a debate that'll rage on forever. But here's what's undeniable. Jon Jones is the only fighter Daniel Cormier couldn't beat. Against everyone else, DC was unstoppable. Frank Mir destroyed him. Roy Nelson dominated. Dan Henderson submitted him. Anthony Rumble Johnson beat him twice. Alexander Gustafsson dominated. Stipe Miocic knocked him out cold. Against literally anyone other than Jon Jones, Daniel Cormier was one of the best to ever do it. And even today, years after they both retired from their rivalry, fighters still bring up Jones versus DC when they talk about legacy. Because that rivalry defined an entire era of the UFC. Recent footage even showed Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier talking cordially before UFC 309. It was surreal. These two hated each other for years, and now they're having civil conversations. Some fighters see that and respect both of them for moving past the beef. Others see it and wonder if DC ever truly got over those losses. Because in fighting, there's one truth that never changes. You can accomplish everything in the world, but if there's one guy you can't beat, that's what people remember. But here's where the Daniel Cormier story gets really interesting. Because DC didn't just fade away after retirement. He became one of the most beloved commentators in UFC history. And fighters have opinions about commentator DC. Some love him. They say he brings a fighter's perspective that nobody else can match. He understands the struggle. He knows what it's like to be in there. When DC says a fighter is in trouble, you believe him, because he's been in trouble against the best in the world. But others? They think DC shows favoritism. They think he's biased towards certain fighters, particularly fighters from American Kickboxing Academy, where he trains. There was controversy when DC called Islam Makhachev fights. People said he was too positive about Islam, too quick to praise him, not critical enough when Islam made mistakes. There was controversy when DC called Khabib Nurmagomedov fights for the same reasons. And there's been controversy about how DC talks about Jon Jones. Some people think DC can't be objective about Jones because of their history. They say when Jones fights, you can hear the bitterness in DC's voice. But here's the thing, DC is human. Of course he has biases. Of course he's going to root for his friends and training partners. And of course he's going to have complicated feelings about Jon Jones. But the reason fighters respect commentator DC is because he's authentic. He doesn't pretend to be a neutral robot. He wears his emotions on his sleeve, and fans love him for it. In fact, DC has become so successful as a commentator that some younger fighters have said they grew up watching him call fights before they ever saw him fight. That's wild. He's transcended from being just a fighter to being the voice of the sport. And when you ask fighters today about Daniel Cormier, half of them talk about his fighting career and half of them talk about hearing him on commentary. He's impacted the sport in two completely different ways. That's rare. Most fighters retire and fade into obscurity. DC retired and became more famous. So what's the verdict on Daniel Cormier? Here's the truth. Fighters respect the hell out of him. Even when they're calling him out, even when they're saying they could beat him, there's always respect underneath. Because Daniel Cormier represents everything that's right about martial arts. He worked his ass off. He overcame tragedy after tragedy. He competed at the highest level in T2U combat sports. He became a double champ at 39 years old. He defended titles in both divisions. He never popped for steroids. He never made excuses. And when it was time to retire, he did it with grace and dignity. Yeah, he lost to Jon Jones twice. But Jon Jones is arguably the greatest fighter of all time. There's no shame in losing to the GOAT. And yeah, younger fighters like Khamzat Chimaev think they could beat him in wrestling. But that's what young, hungry fighters are supposed to think. That confidence is what makes them great. The fact that fighters are still talking about Daniel Cormier in 2025, years after his retirement, tells you everything you need to know. He left a mark on this sport that'll never fade. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's a legend. He's one of the greatest of all time. And whether fighters are praising him or challenging him, they're all talking about him. Because at the end of the day, Daniel Cormier did something most fighters never do. He became unforgettable. And that's the ultimate sign of greatness in this sport. Not just being good for a moment, but being remembered forever. Daniel Cormier, Olympic wrestler, double champ, Hall of Famer, legend. And fighters will be talking about him for decades to come. For decades to come. For decades to come.